Have you ever watched your father or your uncle lean over the open hood of a Chevy Impala on a Saturday morning, no shirt on, radio playing through the screen door, and fix something with a screwdriver, a rag, and a can of something you were not allowed to touch? Have you ever stood there on the driveway, maybe 8 years old, handing him wrenches you did not know the names of, watching him listen to an engine the way a doctor listens to a heartbeat? There was a time in this country when a man did not need a computer to tell him what was happening under the hood. He had his hands, he had his ears, he had tricks passed down from his father, who learned them from his father, who learned them in the military or under a shade tree in somebody's front yard. And those tricks worked. Many of them still do. Today, we are exploring 9 forgotten mechanic secrets from the 1970s that most drivers have never heard of. These are tricks that saved families hundreds of dollars, kept cars running for decades, and carried a kind of quiet genius that modern technology has all but buried. Let us start with the one almost everybody's grandfather knew, but almost nobody talks about anymore: baking soda and battery terminals. It sounds almost too simple to be real. This was the single most common driveway fix of the entire decade. And here is the remarkable thing: it is still the #1 method recommended by ASE certified technicians and the American Automobile Association to this very day. Picture it. You walk out to the car on a cold January morning in 1974, breath hanging white in the air. You turn the key in your Oldsmobile 98, and nothing, not even a click. You pop the hood, and there it is, a thick, ugly crust of blue-green corrosion coating the battery terminals like some kind of alien growth, that powdery acid residue creeping down the cables like it is trying to eat the whole engine bay. In the 1970s, when a car battery cost $12 to $15 and a new one could wreck a weekly household budget of $125, you did not replace anything until you absolutely had to. So here is what Dad did. He walked back inside, grabbed the box of Arm & Hammer from under the kitchen sink, mixed a tablespoon of baking soda into a cup of warm water, brought it out on the porch, and poured it slowly over the corroded terminals while the kids watched from the top step. The sodium bicarbonate neutralized the sulfuric acid buildup on contact, fizzing and bubbling that crusty mess away like a tiny volcano erupting right there on the concrete. Then he would scrub the posts with an old toothbrush, wipe everything dry, and smear a thin coat of petroleum jelly over the clean metal to block future oxidation. That battery would fire up like it rolled off the line yesterday. Now you might have heard that Coca-Cola works too, and technically it does. The phosphoric acid dissolves corrosion, but every experienced mechanic will tell you the sugar in that soda leaves a sticky residue that attracts dirt and creates new problems down the road. Baking soda costs about 30 cents. It is cleaner, it is safer, and it genuinely works better. Some things do not need an upgrade. And speaking of listening to what a car is trying to tell you, this next one might be the most iconic old-school mechanic move ever committed to memory: the screwdriver stethoscope. If you ever saw a man press a long, flathead screwdriver against a running engine, then lean in close and press the handle to the bone right behind his ear, eyes half closed in concentration like a safecracker listening for tumblers, and you thought he looked crazy. He wasn't. He was doing something brilliant. That metal shaft conducts mechanical vibrations through bone conduction, the same principle behind certain modern hearing aids, and it isolates sounds the naked ear cannot separate from the roar of a running motor. A clicking near the valve cover meant misadjusted valves or a collapsed lifter. Grinding at the water pump housing signaled a bearing on its last legs. A deep, rhythmic knock near the oil pan, rod bearing failure, meaning the engine was living on borrowed time, maybe a week, maybe a month, but the clock was running. Higher-pitched slapping against the block was piston slap from worn cylinder walls, the piston rocking in a bore that had grown loose from 150,000 miles of faithful service. This wasn't guesswork. This was precision diagnosis with a tool that costs less than $1 and fit in your back pocket. Haggerty Media still recommends the technique, and professional mechanics use it daily, though most have upgraded to a dedicated stethoscope from Harbor Freight for $5 to $10, mainly to keep your face farther from spinning belts and hot exhaust manifolds. Now here's where it gets really interesting, because this next trick was the engine flush of legend, passed around garages and church parking lots like a sacred recipe. The ATF engine flush. ATF stands for automatic transmission fluid, and every shade tree mechanic in the 1970s knew it contained detergent additives far more powerful than anything in the motor oil of that era. The procedure went like this: drain 1 quart of engine oil, replace it with 1 quart of bright red Dextron ATF, then drive normally for 100 to 500 miles. When you drained it all out and did a proper oil change with a new filter, that once red fluid came out looking like black coffee, visible proof it had dissolved decades of varnish, carbon, and hardened sludge that regular oil could not touch. Old-timers called this giving the motor an enema before surgery. Project Farm, one of YouTube's most rigorous automotive testers with around 6 million subscribers, confirmed through controlled borescope tests that ATF is genuinely effective at dissolving carbon buildup, performing comparably to seafoam. The real danger is that ATF can dislodge large compacted chunks of sludge that clog the oil pickup screen, starving the engine of lubrication. But for a 1970s big block burning a quart every 500 miles and blowing blue smoke at every stoplight, this trick bought families years of service they could not have afforded at a dealership. And if the automatic transmission fluid flush was the remedy, then carburetor tuning by ear and smell was the art form. In every neighborhood, there was one man who could adjust a Rochester Quadrajet or a Holley 4-barrel with nothing but a flathead screwdriver and his own senses, producing results as good as any dealer's service bay with $1,000 in test equipment. The technique was called the lean drop method. You would slowly turn the idle mixture screws inward, 1/8 of a turn at a time, leaning out the fuel-air mixture until the RPM peaked and then suddenly dropped. From that drop point, you backed off roughly half a turn richer. A rich engine had a heavy, loping idle with dark exhaust smoke and a thick gasoline smell. A lean engine idled high and erratic, popping through the carburetor with almost no fuel smell. The sweet spot was a smooth, idle, light tan spark plugs and the faintest trace of warm exhaust. It was found entirely through human perception. Ford's factory procedure actually specified waving an unlit propane torch near the carburetor inlet. If the RPM climbed, the mixture was still too lean. They targeted a 50 RPM rise with propane enrichment. A billion-dollar automaker's official tuning method relied on the same senses your uncle used under a shade tree on Saturday afternoon. Then there was the $5 tool that did the work of a $5,000 diagnostic computer, the vacuum gauge. Connected to an intake manifold vacuum port with a rubber hose, this simple dial measured engine vacuum in inches of mercury and could tell a trained eye more about an engine's health than most scan tools can today. A healthy engine read 17 to 22 inches of mercury at idle, the needle dead steady. If it dropped 1 to 2 inches rhythmically, that indicated an ignition problem, worn plugs, cracked wires, or a bad distributor cap. A 3 to 4 inch drop indicated sticky valves. Regular sweeps of 3 to 8 inches meant burned or leaking valves that needed a valve job. A reading that faded at higher revolutions per minute pointed to an exhaust restriction, such as a clogged catalytic converter or a collapsed muffler. The tuning procedure was elegant. Adjust the mixture screws for the highest, steadiest reading. Advance ignition timing until vacuum peaked. Then retard it by half an inch of mercury to prevent detonation. Snap the throttle. Vacuum should plummet to 5 inches of mercury, then rebound above 21 inches of mercury. That entire diagnostic session cost nothing beyond the gauge. No appointment, no labor charge, no waiting room. Now I have to tell you about the egg trick, because this one sounds like folklore until you understand the science. If your radiator sprung a pinhole leak on the highway, steam hissing from under the hood, and the temperature gauge climbing toward red, you pull over, let things cool, remove the radiator cap, and crack 1 to 3 raw eggs directly into the fill neck. The egg white proteins, primarily albumin, denature and coagulate at approximately 180 degrees Fahrenheit, right at normal coolant temperature. The system's 15 pounds per square inch of pressure pushes that coagulated mass toward the leak, where it lodges and seals the hole. Mythbusters tested this on camera. They punched a hole in a radiator, added a raw egg, and the leak stopped in 5 to 7 seconds. They rated it plausible. Military mechanics used this going back to World War II, where it appeared in Army field repair manuals. The critical rule is, this is strictly a get-you-home fix. That cooked protein will eventually clog your thermostat and heater core, flush the system the moment you reach a shop. And while we are on roadside genius, picture this. You are driving home on a 2-lane highway, 20 miles from anywhere, when you hear that awful screech and thump. Your fan belt just snapped. In 1974, that meant no water pump, no alternator, no power steering. Your engine would overheat in minutes. But if there was a woman in the car, there was a solution in her purse. Pantyhose, nylon stockings, layered 4 or 5 times and wrapped tightly around the pulleys following the original belt path, created enough friction to turn the water pump and alternator for a slow drive to the nearest station. This worked because cars from the 1970s used V-belt systems with deep-grooved pulleys that gripped the stretchy nylon with surprising tenacity. The Chicago Tribune automotive columnist confirmed the technique, and it was taught in community college auto maintenance courses throughout the decade. It does not work on modern serpentine belt systems. The flat, multi-ribbed pulleys provide zero grip for improvised materials, but in 1974, a pair of legs pantyhose bought for $1.69 could be the difference between a $50 tow bill and making it home for dinner. This is also the right moment to honor the products that kept these cars breathing, products you can still find on shelves today. Marvel Mystery Oil was created in 1923 by Bert Pierce in Chicago, who had invented the Marvel carburetor, which was standard on 80% of vehicles after World War I. When poorly refined high-lead gasoline gummed those carburetors shut, he formulated a petroleum solvent to clean them. When customers asked what was in it, Pierce always said, "It's a mystery." The name stuck. The red bottle became iconic, and mechanics used it for everything. Fuel additive, oil supplement, and most famously poured into spark plug holes to free stuck piston rings overnight. It served in World War II aircraft, battleships, and tanks. Then there was Seafoam, created in the 1930s by Fred Fandry, a Sinclair oil district manager who just wanted his fishing boat motor to stop choking. He sold his first batches in beer bottles to friends at Lake Freeman, Indiana. Trademarked in 1942, its formula has not changed since 1940, and Project Farm testing confirmed it genuinely reduces carbon deposits on piston crowns and in combustion chambers. And WD-40, which stands for water displacement and the 40th formula, was invented in 1953 to protect Atlas missile skins from rust. Workers liked it so much they sneaked cans home in their lunch boxes. By 1973, the company went public and the stock surged 61% on day one. For every shade tree mechanic, spraying WD-40 inside a wet distributor cap on a humid Monday morning to restore spark was the price of getting to work on time. But underneath all the tricks and products, there was a deeper story, one most people never learned. In 1970, according to U.S. Census data, the median income for Black families was $6,520. just 64% of the white median of $10,240. A new Chevrolet Impala, over 600,000 built that year alone, and making it the best-selling full-size car in America, cost more than $3,000. A tune-up ran $20 to $30 when your household brought home $125 a week before taxes. Gas was 36 cents a gallon. But after the Arab oil embargo hit in October of 1973, prices surged 43% almost overnight. By late February of 1974, 20% of American gas stations had no fuel at all. States implemented the odd-even license plate rationing system. Odd plates bought gas on odd days, even plates on even days, and 3 color flags marked stations. Green meant fuel available, yellow meant rationed, red meant empty. The economic pressure was suffocating, and the discrimination went beyond income and gas lines. A Yale Law School study by Ian Ayres found black male buyers were quoted more than double the markup charged to white males at the same dealerships for the exact same vehicles. Being overcharged or refused service at white-owned shops made learning to fix your own car a survival strategy, refined over generations and passed down like a birthright. Under every shade tree, chain hoist hanging from a thick limb, tools spread on an army blanket, engine block resting on a cable spool, there was a complete repair facility built on brilliance, born from being told no. Skills traveled from father to son, uncle to nephew, neighbor to neighbor, because the community's mobility depended on it. Wendell Scott learned to wrench with the Red Ball Express, the predominantly black trucking convoy that delivered supplies to Allied forces after D-Day. He returned to Danville, Virginia, opened his repair shop, tuned his cars fast enough to outrun police, running moonshine through the Blue Ridge Mountains, and became NASCAR's first black driver. He won his first Grand National race on December 1st, 1963 in Jacksonville, Florida, though officials initially awarded the trophy to the second-place finisher and corrected the record only days later. Every car that rolled off a shade tree mechanic's driveway, running smooth, was a quiet declaration, I can take care of what is mine. And maybe that declaration is the real secret this whole video has been building toward. It was never about the baking soda or the transmission fluid or the eggs in the radiator. It was about a philosophy woven into every one of those tricks, the belief that understanding the machine your life depends on is itself a form of freedom, that self-reliance is not just practical, but deeply, irreversibly personal. The Buick Electra 225, the deuce and a quarter, named for its 225 inches of overall length, sitting in the driveway with its thundering 455 cubic inch V8, producing 370 horsepower, chrome trim catching the afternoon sun, was not just a car. At a 1970 base price of around $4,600, it was cheaper than a Cadillac, but carried the same commanding presence. And the man who kept it running himself, who changed the oil and adjusted the valves and tuned the carburetor with nothing but his hands and his knowledge, answered to nobody. The shade tree was not merely a workshop. It was a classroom without walls, a gathering place for 3 generations at once, a cathedral of quiet competence where knowledge passed from calloused hands to young ones through patience, repetition, and love. The little boy handing wrenches grows up to teach his own son, and the chain never breaks as long as someone remembers how the engine sounds when it's running right. Today, modern vehicles carry 13 or more electronic control modules. Labor rates average $120 to $150 an hour, with dealerships regularly exceeding $200 an hour. The Haynes Repair Manual, the Shade Tree Mechanic's Bible, over 200 million copies sold since 1960, stopped printing new editions in December 2020, a milestone that passed almost without anyone noticing. But here is what gives me hope. A recent survey found Generation Z is more likely to attempt their own repairs than boomers, 86% compared to 46%, driven by YouTube tutorials and the same economic pressure that built this culture in the first place. The spirit of that driveway, that shade tree, that man with a screwdriver pressed to a running engine, and his family's whole world held together by what he knew: that spirit did not die. It found a new generation ready to carry it. Thank you so much for taking this trip down memory lane with me. If this brought you back to a driveway, a garage, or a Saturday morning you thought you'd forgotten, please like this video. Share this with someone who remembers the smell of motor oil on warm concrete and the sound of a carburetor being tuned by hand. And if you haven't already, subscribe so you never miss another journey like this one.